Yeah. So it's going and it's picking up the sound pretty good right there.
I see, and
And
that's very
so,
cool.
that's, I can leave this over here. I think it'll be okay for now. Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate you just taking the time to sit down with me again. Because there are so many times I try to explain, what the book is and what it's about. And, so many people want the short form, like version of it. They're like, give me the like TikTok
Right,
version of your
right,
book. And I'm like,
right,
that's not a real thing.
right, right,
I
right.
think the shorter kind of attention span, the lack of like in depth explanations, and just willingness to kind of get into, the intellectual part of the work that we do is the
Yes.
reason we're in a lot of the stuff that we're in, as a city, as a country, as a world today. Um, and so I just, yeah, I appreciate it. And I was watching back on our initial conversation, and I was like, oh, there's so many gems in here. Let me start to like pick some of this out. And I thought, oh, you know what? It might even be a really great opportunity to talk more about your book,
Mm,
as
mm,
well.
mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
I started to kind of open it up and look into it a little bit more. There's research, there's stories, there's this like
Mm-hmm.
theory. And, I know that my book, it's a bunch of like stories and lived experience, and it's less on the like theoretical
Mm,
end,
mm,
right?
mm,
Because
mm.
I wanted to create something for people to be able to kind of pick up and use in their
Mm-hmm,
practice, be able
mm-hmm,
to kind of repeat the stories or like leverage the curriculum and
mm-hmm,
ask these questions and things like that. But the other side of it is like equally as important,
mm-hmm.
that people know that it's not just coming out of nowhere, right?
Right,
This
right.
is stuff that has helped to kind of develop my methodology, my frame, for even writing and way of being. And I think that people miss that. I
Mm-hmm,
think people, they pick up pieces
mm-hmm,
now,
mm-hmm.
and not that kind of larger context of this is the thing that helps to guide and shape our decision making.
Mm-hmm.
These are the theories, these are authors, these are, books that you should be reading, pieces to consider, interviews to watch,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's all of that that's in there. And so I just thought like this could be an opportunity to kind of dive a little bit deeper into all of that. And
I
then figure out also like some of the next steps, like where you want to go, right?
Oh, for
And some of the things that
sure.
you
Oh,
want to
for
do,
sure.
because people will get a chance to kind of see this, on video, and then will want to connect with you too, right? And
Oh,
so
for
this is my
sure. For
way to
sure.
share
For sure.
about, some of the work that you're doing and how we're connected.
I appreciate that on a lot of levels because one of the things about my book is that although there are specifics in there, it is still this umbrella paradigm, this umbrella theory from cultural deprivation to cultural security. Where I've wanted to go and haven't really yet is to now dive deep into the lived experiences of cultural deprivation and cultural security. And what I said in that initial interview that we did at Sac State, I see your text, your project, your effort as one of moving toward cultural security,
Yeah.
right? Hip hop is part of the culture, right? Hip hop has always been part of the culture, right? Like going back into the ants, right? To,
Right.
to the
Right.
continent. So that has been subjected to cultural deprivation. What you're doing is showing a way toward cultural security. Now, I know that there are others that are doing that in the on the big screen, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But I critique some of that big screen stuff and see that as more examples of cultural deprivation, although it's counterinsurgents doing the cultural deprivation within and all of that, right? Gets into complex stuff. I know that, so I don't want to go in that direction right this minute.
Yeah.
Except to say that, my piece is for educators and the allied health profession, but there's something for everybody there. I talk about cultural deprivation and first lay that out from the American Psychological Association perspective, looking at when folks don't have access, when minoritized and marginalized folk don't have access to the dominant culture. Secondly, when minoritized and marginalized folk don't have access to their own culture in formal and informal spaces, right? And then finally, when folks are subjected to experiences where they are ripped of all cultural stimulation or experience, right? I give in that book these historic and some contemporary examples, but in our current world, it's just like the examples are spiraling off everywhere, right? The flip side of that is cultural security, and I'm really using an Afrocentric paradigm in that regard because I'm coming from the work of Wade Nobles, from Cheikh Anta Diop, who says cultural security is about the psychology, the history, and the language, right? And hip-hop leadership is hitting on all of that, right? I push it down into a practitioner's level using an ethnic studies lens when I talk about ancestor veneration, I talk about spirituality or mindfulness practices, relationship building, right, and indigeneity. Hip-hop leadership is doing all of that, right?
Thank you.
And so when I look at our work together, I see, me with these philosophical, theoretical paradigms, and I see your project as fulfilling the mission of cultural security. And so this dialogue is an opportunity for me to say, all right, let's drill down into some of the examples now. Let's see where it's happening. Right. Like I said, when I'm thinking about this Philly trip and doing these dialogue dinners, that's what I'm trying to do, is to dig down into where's the contemporary lived experiences of cultural deprivation and the contemporary lived resistance that leads toward cultural security.
Yeah, no, that's dope. And I think part of what's really, I think, cool to kind of hear this is, when I think about even the work you did with ethnic studies, right, and the creation of a textbook, and how that wasn't just an individual effort, right? The opportunity to amplify people's stories, whether they were students, their parents, community members, people with these really kind of unique cultural histories in the region of Sacramento, kind of Northern California, and platforming them in a textbook to say, your lived experience is going to be the thing that the next generation of students study and see themselves in and through. And some people were like academics and experts and teachers and that, and that's really cool and important. But to also know that there were poets and artists and other kinds of people who were part of that experience. I think a lot of that, seeing it, not being involved in that process, but seeing it through my partner, right? Seeing it through you and kind of all the different people who we know that was doing that work, really informed and shaped my process for developing what this was and what it is. And so even before kind of hearing about some of the theoretical, just seeing the practice of, oh no, that feels good, that feels right. We know that that's what's missing right now. And in order to create more of that, we have to be the ones who are doing the work, right? And there's, I think, also a special place for artists in the creation of educational materials. And I go back in time to kind of think about that. I think about the history of Black Panthers, and specifically, right? And the Black Panthers have their own unique history here in Sacramento, and kind of starting in Oakland and in the Bay Area, right, and generating that movement. But the political and the personal were the same. Like there wasn't like this separation, and so for me, even a lot of the music and the art stuff that we experience today, that to me is strange when it's devoid of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I always question like who's pushing that, who's benefiting from that. We know labels and the deals that they offer artists, right?
Yeah,
so they're not
yeah.
always kind of monetizing.
They're not out for the culture. They're not out for the culture.
Yeah,
right?
And so the separation of that, I think, is always whenever I've heard stuff and it's like, oh, there's no identity in this. There's no authenticity in this. I've always had to kind of question that. But seeing the Panthers, and even some of the stories about when they would throw parties, they were like conscious, dance music parties and events, where that type of conscious music would get played because they understood that even the subconscious messaging and a lot of times the overt messaging in the music is the thing that really sets the tone for everybody else. And growing up on, Talib Kweli and, Mos Def, who's now Yasin Bey, and Common, and, artists like that, hearing, Nas, from, being a teenager and then watching his growth and evolution. But the things that they would talk about made me want to learn more. And so the role of artists in then shaping that kind of love of learning, and that's not just like something that you have to do in school. That's something that can happen on street corners and barbershops and in living rooms, right? And all of that. And so just that, I think, framing, seeing you all put a book together like that was full of stories like that, knowing that teachers and students and people who could benefit from that example, I thought was really important and critical.
But you resonated with that project, and you're talking about Our Stories and Our Voices, right?
Yeah.
The previous book for high school, the ethnic studies book.
Yeah.
You resonated with that because that's what you're made up of. Because I was meeting you in that time frame, right? I mean, I wasn't meeting you. I had met you before that, but we were evolving in our relationship. And I was tapping into things that you were doing, right? Like I had been to at least 2 of your community performances, and then it was through you that we brought So Far here, right? And I know you're still vibing with those folks. I'm still vibing with some of those folks that I met that night, right?
Wow.
And doing different kinds of little endeavors and side projects and what have you. So you've always had the sense of the importance of the individual in the collective, and the collective inside the individual. So you've always demonstrated and represented that. And like in this space right here, that ethnic studies work was happening every 2 weeks for a period of several years with all of these different folks coming through. And the book is one product that came out of it. But there were a lot of folks that also did research articles out of it, and laws that came from it, policies that came from it. And so, and like I'm saying these things, right, and knowing my own role in it, but I'm, of course, hearing Madi and seeing her too, right? Because she was one of those pivotal people. She gave the template for the curriculum that all of the other districts in this region used. Because after she did her thing, we used hers for Sac City. And then I used that in other districts that I consulted with, but then other districts just tapped into it, right? So the whole thing is about the individual and the collective. And that's very much, I mean, that's discussed explicitly in your book on hip hop leadership. And I remember when you were here, I was in the other room and I didn't hear you, right? But you were out here, and we had some poets doing their thing, and you started to cipher in this room. And you were calling out to me. I didn't hear you. And somebody said, "Yeah, he's calling you," right? So I came running out, too late to get up in the mix. But the point is that, you were doing that collective move. I remember at the Multicultural Education Conference when you opened it up for the satellite conference for the National Center for Black Writers, National Black Writers Conference, right? And I still see how you had one of your poets. First of all, I thought it was going to be just you, but you had one of your poets posted up in another part of the auditorium and somebody else in another part. And there was just this cacophony of sounds coming from different places to make this one, boom, performance. And so, so you've always been about the collective in the individual and the individual in the collective. For sure. Yeah.
I think about that day pretty often these days, especially now because Shanaka Hodge was one of the...
She's blown up, I know, and she was she was the speaker.
I know.
She was the speaker for the conference, yes.
But having the chance to kind of meet her, and then, to kind of watch her own growth and evolution over time. And now, I was just playing Ironheart, for Marty's family. And, we had it in Spanish and it was going. And I was like, the person who created the show has produced the show. We have a direct tie and relationship with. And so that is pretty wild. But also, the person who, created this like National Black Writers, conference is Talib Kweli's mom, Dr. Brenda Green. That's right. And I've run into Talib a couple times now.
Oh, okay. I saw at least one instance when you called him out on stage to come and sign your piece because you had met his mom.
He could not believe it. He said, "My mom is signing autographs." That was pretty wild. I ran into him again at South by Southwest.
Okay.
And he was releasing his book, Vibrate Higher. And when I think about the role of hip hop in education and artists kind of stepping up to provide. I know that his family's kind of owned a bookstore in Kiru Bookstore, in Brooklyn. And now I think it's online. I don't know if they have a physical location or not. I have to double check.
I'm not sure. I haven't been there, but I kind of filmed there years ago for WNET, actually. With Abiodun Oyewole, right? From The Last Poets. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't.
Right,
I haven't. You have to send it to me. For sure.
That was some years ago, but for sure,
Yeah, and so I think about that part of, whether rappers have had parents, family members, or influences from, certain teachers to then want to write their own books. And I was going through my personal library, and this is your, personal library here. And it's only some of the books. There's a whole other room.
Right.
Piles and piles of more books. Right. But I was going through and I was looking at all of the hip hop titles, and I'm like, Common has written a couple of books now. Black Thought, recently, wrote something. Talib Kweli, obviously.
The Upcycle.
Yeah, and then you have folks like Terminology, who wrote a book called How to Be a Better Dad, like 101 Ways to Be a Better Dad, and he's got a whole movement around fatherhood and things like that. But just seeing just all of these kind of books from hip hop culture to not only preserve the historical context of the culture, but also to teach these lessons that we can all use. And so for me, I think my experience has always been that hip hop is also literature.
Oh, without a doubt. Look at what you're wearing. Rhapsody, right? Yeah. I used Rhapsody's Eve as a text for at least 2 classes that I've taught, right? This last curriculum class, it's a doctorate level course. And they had to, analyze the work for sure, but then they had to create curriculum from it, and then they had to, of course, situate that within, education framework, what have you. But then similarly, when I was teaching class at Mills on Black Panther and education, really, that's what they asked me to teach. That's one of the texts we use, right? So that's literature. But the other thing is, several artists have come from educators. Several hip hop artists. I know, of course, and it may surprise some people, right? But Kanye West's mom, right?
That's
Donda
right.
West. I knew her at the National Council of Teachers of English.
Wow.
She was a beautiful woman, and she always treated me beautifully. She was a member of the Black Caucus. She was a college section, powerful woman. And I'm told that Mos Def's mom was also an English teacher. I don't know if that's true or not. But I know that Brenda Green, who we just mentioned, Talib, she used to do at, I think, the Modern Language Association conference, panels called the Hip Hop Moms.
Wow.
And and it was Donda West, it was Brenda Green, and I think it was Mos Def's mom. I'm less sure on that one, but I know it was the other two, right? They're both college, English professors, right?
Yeah.
So there's that, but then there's just all of the literary stuff that's in some of the music, right? The direct references to different historic lit, right? So, yeah, hip hop is literature. It is literature. It is. And we know, of course, that there are dissertations that are essentially they're hip hop albums, right? That's what they are.
Yeah.
Right. So
A.D. Carson.
Yes.
Yes. Obasi Shah, earned his bachelor's degree from Harvard with an album.
Yes.
There are other folks who've earned master's degrees.
Yes.
Using this context, and it's just wild because 20 years ago when I was in school at Holy Cross in Worcester, I couldn't write about any of this.
And see, when you say I couldn't write about this, you're signifying on how it is literature, because what people are doing now is doing, in addition to producing the text, they're doing literary analysis of the text of hip hop music.
And my thing was like, I wanted to study sociology, couldn't get into any of the classes, but ended up taking like enough public policy, you know what I mean? Intro to con law and all this kind of stuff. And the examples of the way that policy is shaped, the way our laws are written, my professors wanted us to, kind of belong to the status quo. It was political science was like this fast track to law school, where we were at. And so, and a conservative interpretation of the law is really the direction that they were pushing all of us in. And for me, it was just contrary to the way I lived, right? And what I experienced growing up is that, communities, protests, developing of new policies, advocating, through their locally elected officials and other kinds of lawmakers was the experience that I saw growing up. It's like we shaped what was happening. It wasn't just the way that a judge would interpret it, because, we've seen all just the injustices and the bias, right, and the skew kind of against us. And there are so many kind of systemic problems contributing to that, and we understand that, but not being allowed to even offer something different frustrated me a ton when I was in school.
See, that's cultural deprivation.
Yeah, and I didn't have
you didn't have the language,
I didn't
right,
have,
to say that then,
yeah,
right? But that's cultural deprivation, and what was resonating for you aesthetically, because you had an interest, but also culturally, it was being denied you in those spaces.
Yeah.
Consciously or unconsciously, right? That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But you weren't getting it.
No.
You weren't getting access to your stuff.
Right.
And you were being deprived of it.
And my community, even when I was in college, because I was working 3 jobs, tutoring and mentoring at, Nativity Prep in Worcester, which is like a sister school to my middle school. I running an intramural sports program, for the youth, and also coaching basketball And so being in community, it was like what I'm not receiving here in school is just being affirmed in these other spaces. And so I'm like, there's a disconnect, and I can't understand why this is. And it wasn't until there was a professor, his name was Ricardo Dobles. He was the first Puerto Rican professor I ever had. You know, he's from, you know, New York, but, you know, got advanced degrees from the Ivy Leagues and was teaching this class on, education for social and political change. And I was like, this is completely different than everything else I've experienced. He even played Lupe Fiasco in class.
See, well,
You know.
talk about literary references.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Lupe's amazing.
Yeah, and
he was incorporating hip hop into the education space,
right,
for sure.
And so just the relationship that we were able to build also let me know that, like, it was okay to leave school, right, to find another kind of method or means for me to explore what it was that I wanted out of an educational experience. And so when I left school and then I joined City Year, it was like, oh, this is the place I'm supposed to be.
I want to break down
Yeah.
some of what you said in your narrative in terms of what you were getting in that education space. Right? You were being blocked from access, right? Denied from access. This guy created that access, and what did he do? He gave you language, right? Because the hip hop language and musicality, right? And he also gave you history, because it's connecting you up to that history,
right?
And he was also obviously putting it in a space of advocacy because it's for change, but he was doing it relationally, right? Because you remember his name to this day,
Yeah,
right? So he was implementing elements of cultural security into your education.
Yeah.
And thereby allowing you to be able to move into this next move and say, whether I'm going to call it that or something different, that's what I'm working toward.
Yeah. Yeah. And it being at City Year gave me even more language, right? Around leadership development, around trauma, the brain-body connection, just all of the stuff that, I wasn't a psychology major, so I wasn't getting that information. But all the stuff that was like, man, I feel like I missed out on so much. My community's teaching me, being in this AmeriCorps, program, earning a stipend, like this is teaching me, being around my students, right? They're teaching me, and you look up and it's so many years later, and now the conversations are different, right? I had a conversation after I had a chance to deliver a keynote speech at my middle school, and president of my middle school goes, I know the president at Holy Cross. We should see if we can figure out like a pathway to like earning your degree. And so get on the line with the president, the head of the DEI department, one of the class deans, and we're having this conversation. And I tell him, I'm like, I've done so much, in this space. Holy Cross is not the expert in my industry. You do nothing around hip hop education. In fact, your students study me right now in your hip hop and identity course for freshmen. And it kind of opened up their mind. They're like, whoa, like we didn't know. And, they wanted me to like re-enroll to finish. And I said, no, because that's not my goal and purpose here. Like I'm not just looking for like a degree pathway for me. It's for all of the other, folks who are like me, who also felt deprived, right? And didn't feel like their place was secure here.
My daughter.
Yeah, you got it.
No, it's not. Okay, cool.
And so, in explaining that to them, I think I kind of put them in a hard place because I think that they thought that they were just dealing with like a single individual case. And I told them, and the DI director was like, you're right about this. It's part of the reason that this department even exists is because the college and institution wasn't, doing a great job of this before. And so they were like, well, we don't have any policies. There's not a lot of models for a program for adults to come in and even finish. And then Sac State, is doing a thing, and now Morehouse is also doing a thing, and there's a couple other kind of colleges, and I'd compile these things and I would send it to them. And it's funny because the DEI director even asked me, like, do you just want to work here? And
I'm like, of course he did.
I'm like, I love y'all, but like, no.
Yeah,
like
right.
that also was not part of my intention for starting these conversations. It's also just wild to me that, like, your students are studying me. You would rather offer me a job before offering me the thing that I came here for, which was a degree.
Yeah.
And so it's just, and it's interesting that those conversations have been happening the past year and a half, almost 2 years now. And at the same time, there are people in the hip hop space creating brand new lanes. When I think about the work of Martha Diaz, Mickey Fax started a whole hip hop, school online. I met Martha Diaz here when she was consulting with the State Department of Education, and they were looking to have hip hop artists become CTE, right? So like career technical, educators, and using like music business as a pathway for introducing, artists into the classroom and increase diversity and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. Martha just told me about a program that they're starting this fall for hip hop artists to earn bachelor's degrees. And she's like, especially folks who've had this like express kind of desire and or interest in the education space. And she's like, if you're running a nonprofit, an after school program, or this or that, you're doing all these things, but instead of having a teaching credential on the end of a program that we start, a lot of times the barrier for entry is the degree.
That's right.
So she was like, if we just have a degree program and we can start with an initial cohort where your lived experience counts and you do a little bit of coursework and we get you across the finish line, then that opens up possibilities for you. And so she asked me if I'd be interested in being part of that cohort this fall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is amazing.
That's what's up.
And at the same time, I'm also like developing hip hop curriculum for like a high school that's like an alternative like charter school that's like a last stop for like kids in the Lowell education system out in Massachusetts. And so it's just interesting how 20 years ago like could not was shut out, and now no doubt. Because of this culture and the work that's been done by so many people, I'm not only designing curriculum to impact students who've been negatively impacted from the educational system and deprived, culturally. I'm creating, this curriculum to affirm them, to provide that cultural security. And then also I'll be going through, right, a program that is doing that too, right? And I think that's...
Well, it further authenticates you as an actor in those spaces.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're enacting this on multiple platforms simultaneously, right? In a performative space, in an entrepreneurial space, in the academic space as an educator, in the academic space as a student. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, you're in hip hop word, right? You're real, right? You're real.
I appreciate that.
Way,
yeah.
That's what's up.
I think about the space that we're currently occupying and how we are creating and shaping and designing, right? Like what the future will be. I went to a conference at Harvard maybe a couple months ago. Lots of hip hop academics in the room. And I asked a question about...
Was Emden up in there?
He wasn't there that day, but I'll leave the other names out of this.
For sure.
Because I asked a question about, a lot of the speaking points that day were about things that were missing, about challenges, about, kind of the lack of scholarship even in the hip hop space. And I asked a question about, like, where do we see the future going? Like what, can we hope for or aspire to in that way? Knowing that we are dealing with all of this stuff, like on the flip side, and the response I got was just not satisfactory. It just wasn't. It just went down this rabbit hole. I was just like, thanks. It's just not what I was looking for, right? And it's not to negate or demean any of those people who were there, but for me, I think that there's a lot to be hopeful for. But I'm also not in the space of being a college professor, and so I don't know the politics of what it means to kind of introduce courses on campus or to be an educational leader in those spaces, right? I'm coming to the work from the perspective as an artist, so it's a little different.
It wasn't that long ago that, what you're saying is true in terms of where we have come and the things that we can do right now in this regard. But it wasn't that long ago when Cornel West was, basically kicked out of Harvard, right, for cutting the hip hop CD, right? When Michael Eric Dyson was critiqued for writing a book about Tupac and hip hop in general. They stood on business and stayed true to that, and they are still scholarly giants doing the work. Yeah. I'm curious if you've ever read any of Sammy Alim's work. He was at the conference too, but I don't know if you were there at that time.
Yeah.
Do you know Sammy Alim?
I do.
Okay, that's what's up. That's what's up. Good.
And I was trying to remember like what book of his when I met him. I was like, I know your name. I've read something from you, and I'm blanking on what that is. And he goes, "You should buy my books."
Yeah. I mean, he's got he's very, very prolific. He's got quite a number.
He's incredible. Yeah.
My sort of intersection with him, other than like breaking bread and that kind of thing, right? But was when I was teaching a linguistics for educators class, actually at Cal Berkeley as an adjunct, and I taught it with a woman who was a linguist, and I was really bringing in an educator's piece of it. But the book that we used had it's called Educational Linguistics, I think. Maybe that wasn't the title of it, but the book had a really, really nice essay by him breaking down, I think what he called hip hop nation language was how the frame that he used in that piece. And he was analyzing a lot of the linguistic tropes that different artists were using, categorizing it in different ways. And of course, Sammy Alim, he would travel with the artist and do the research full on, right? So it's like some of these guys' friends, and so forth, right? But I also think of Gloria Ladson Billings' work with the Jizza at Teachers College, I believe. Although she's not at Teachers College, because Endon was, but the work that was being done was at Teachers College in science education, and science pedagogy, right?
I've had a chance to see some of that a little bit. I had a chance to meet him when he did, I think, a speech or a talk at UC Davis.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and then he had a show that night or something like that in Sacramento.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
And he popped out into the crowd and started passing the microphone around. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna get on the mic.
Did you get on the mic? Oh, that's legendary, man.
I have a friend who took this incredible photo.
Oh, that's what's up.
And there was this moment. I started, there's a lot of rappers in the room who were rapping just to rap, and all of the tricks and the techniques and all of that stuff. But I have actual substance in my work.
You do.
And so, he was cutting people off after like 16s, just letting them do a verse. But then he actually asked the crowd to quiet down in my performance so he could intently listen.
Oh, that's what's up. That's what's up.
And that was really cool. That's what's up to experience. Yeah.
Well, those bars that he busts out in Rhapsody's piece, Empty Hajj, right? He breaks down what hip hop philosophy and that the MC is supposed to be all about.
Right.
right? And it's not supposed to be about any nonsense,
Yeah.
right? You're supposed to really, what does he say? Should electrify, beautify. He
Yeah.
says that you're supposed to like really move folk,
Yeah.
not just with the technique, which the technique is right,
That's
but
important.
right. But you gotta come with it like Lupe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the technique's not more
uh,
important than the actual,
Yeah, that's right.
substantive
That's right.
content.
That's right.
And you could have a lot of content and it can be corny.
Yeah, yeah,
it's just
yeah,
what it
yeah.
is, and then it won't move anybody.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there is a blend of both, and I think my favorite artists have understood how to
Yeah.
blend that both.
All right, so we got to go there.
Yeah.
Who are your favorites? Who are your favorites?
Oh man, of all time, I think the list is, folks like, Common, Quali, Yasin Bey, Black Thought, Nas. It's probably like top five. But I think that list is less interesting than like who am I actively listening to now?
Oh, for sure. Okay.
Because
Okay. Yeah.
that list is, I think, really different. And so when I think about artists like Radimus, right, who Dominican artist out of Brooklyn, who I think now is living out in LA. He actually just got married, but is a real poet, and just I told him, I had breakfast with him, I was like, you rap like a Jackson Pollock painting. It's like it's substantive, it's so meaningful, but it's the way that sounds get laid throughout. It's not orthodox, and so he's really cool to listen to. Rhapsody is another one of those artists, right? Who's I think is incredible. La Russell, is another one too. Who I think just the honesty, the vulnerability, right, and how authentic he comes across in all of his work.
I'm
I
sorry.
think no, it's okay.
I'll get that brother back.
Yeah, I think all of that is really special. And then there are artists from Boston who I think are young and incredible. There's an artist, her name is Nay Speaks. She grew up maybe a couple blocks away from like where I live now. She's, I think, a sophomore at Spelman University, maybe going into her junior year. And just the perspective in the rap technique, is there, and that's solid. But her approach is of poetry, storytelling, and I think it's like a perfect complement to like a Rhapsody, but Rhapsody is, closer to my age. Talking about somebody who's coming, into her, adult season, you know what I mean? At, 20 or 21 years old, but stylistically offering something that comes with maybe another 20 years of wisdom, but is doing that at that age. You have artists like some of my students, Joe Sazza, who's an incredible, artist, very versatile, but is, very much the storyteller, like a akin to J. Cole, and his ability to produce music, write lyrics, all of that. And another one of my students, Maceo Mays, who he just had an album produced by Ed O.G.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
you don't get embraced by Edo unless it's really authentic. And Maceo tells a story about how his father used to listen to Ed O.G. and specifically the song "Father to Child." And so Maceo wrote a song called "Father to Child" about how his dad was inspired and now how his dad's inspiration is working with him. And and he performed that for his dad, and everybody's crying and real emotional moment. But Maceo's another one of those folks who just understands kind of culturally the roots and loves to explore and dive deep and listen to jazz and music from other cultures, and all of that stuff is mixed up in there. And so I think about folks like that. I have a bunch of other kind of hip hop, mentees and artists who, I take under my wing as well. But, there's just so much incredible talent.
Yeah. I like how you framed that, man. I like how you certainly busted out with your top five, but you looked at it as a living and evolving tradition, and you looked at. Well, let me talk to you about what's growing right now, for sure.
Yeah. How about you? Where's your list these days?
Well, it's with Rhapsody. For sure, Rhapsody. I probably play her right now more than anybody else. And honestly, I'm still constantly listening to Dead Prez and Outkast. Those are probably it for me. I saw Diggable Planets not long ago.
Wow. Yeah.
And as intellectual rappers, they were always
I saw them and they were on tour with the Roots and Arrested Development.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What an incredible!
Oh man!
I felt like I was sitting down at like the best kind of lecture series.
Oh yeah!
As a musician and as an artist, it was powerful.
Oh, I know it was. Arrested Development, man. Roots too. When I was in college, I won a scholarship award. And I went to the dinner, and Speech was the keynote speaker.
Wow.
And he was also receiving an award. And this was in Milwaukee, and it turns out he went to school there. I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't even know who he was until they cut part of his video right before he walked on. I was like, oh, that's Tennessee. I thought that was your name. I'm just teasing. But
yeah.
But he came up and made a few remarks and what have you and so forth. I'll never kind of forget that particular moment. I didn't speak to him or anything like that, right? He was just there. But it was like, you busted out this stuff in the popular culture world. You busted out. I mean, look, Tennessee is a song about cultural security, right? It's down to the elements of ancestral veneration comes out in there, right? And so he was in this mainstream education space, and he was just kind of just like hanging out and whatever, right? But he was like, you might even say with a song like that, he had a pre-perception of all of the ways in which we are talking about ancestry right now in mainstream spaces and in commercial spaces. Ancestor veneration's always been part of the culture.
Yeah.
Going all the way back, right? And I know it's also cross-culture, blah, 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 right? But we're talking about it in this specific instance.
Yeah.
And so talk about hip-hop education, talk about hip-hop literature, talk about the hip-hop phenomena, talk about hip-hop leadership, yeah. And so you saw Arrested Development. I bet you did feel like you were going to a lecture series with those three artists.
It was amazing. Amazing. Yeah. And, now I know the artists who like pick up the mantle, right? Like D1. Who's incredible. He's teaching a hip hop and social justice course at Tufts University right now. He was a 7th grade math teacher out of New Orleans, and he saw the violence and kind of a lot of the stuff that was, pulling on students away from the classroom, and said, I want to impact what that looks like in the pop culture space. I want to show them that you could make it in this way without having to sacrifice your values and who you are at your core. And
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I would be remiss if I did not also say, of course I'm listening to Kendrick, right?
Yeah, no, of course. Like, who's not?
And I almost wanted to even wax on that about how everybody was quoting him at graduation, but it was like, no, who's not?
Right.
They're quoting them in the gas station.
Right.
Right.
He's
And then
everywhere.
hospitals.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So of course, I'm I'm vibing.
No,
On that,
he's one of the, I think, biggest signals, right? He shouted out
Ooh.
D1 in one of his records.
Ooh, one of the biggest signals. That's a
Yeah, that
that's a
there's this
nice framing.
cultural like shift that's happening. It almost feels like in some ways for some folks it's a cultural reset. But I think that our understanding is that like the culture never stopped. It may not be like there may not be a spotlight on it all the time, but it's never
But it's never
stopped.
stopped. It's never stopped.
And so for
That's
me,
right.
it feels
That's
like
right.
like in the mainstream, there's this shift away from things that feel inauthentic and just not connected, with purpose, right, and with values to let's move people a little bit closer this way.
Black culture
Yeah.
has always been doing that and has always been impacting world culture in that way. As soon as it gets a little too mainstream, a few artists will still make some ducats on it if they had the right contracts. But the culture moves away from it and says, "Look what we're doing over here." No, don't look. And you're gonna look at it even more so, right?
Yeah.
So you're right about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to dip too far into that, but look at what's happening with Essence right now,
Yeah.
right? The critique is what it is, but the footage of the lack of people in the crowd is what told me. Whatever else people want to say, they can say. However else you want to break it down as to who did what. I saw cats were going. They had already peeped that out, and enough people said, "I'm not even going to go."
Yeah, and that's tough.
It is, man. It is.
That's tough
It is.
because I know from producing large scale events, like obviously I've never done like an Essence Fest, but I've done my fair share of large scale events where timing matters, the tightness of the program really matters, and when you have like a couple of things that run 5-10 minutes over all day, you get to the end of the day and you're like, how did we get an hour and a half behind, 2 hours behind, or more? And I can only imagine what that must be like for an event at that scale.
Well, and the production is only like one aspect that folks are critiquing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pointing to the one guy who used to run it tight, and he's not there, and so forth, and so there's that for sure.
But then there's the other kind of components when you look at things like sponsors, when you look at people who's on the leadership team, when you look at like all these other things about specific decisions that are being made and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, we're not centering this cultural component and aspect, and
the bottom line for me in all of that, you had empty seats, lots empty seats.
Yeah.
Lots empty seats.
Yeah.
The culture will move away from that. They'll move away from it.
Yeah.
Be like, no.
It's tough. I think
because that's not cultural security.
It's not.
Right? That's not keeping us secure.
No.
That's not, holding the grills with all of the praise that they should be getting and taking care of all of their creature comforts so that they can dispense knowledge.
Right.
That's not making sure that, we're remembering the ancestors who helped put on the damn thing. Right?
Is it even possible to do at that type of scale though? I just I think about like ancestrally, right? Have we ever had events that were in stadiums? You know what I mean? Like it feels the other thing that's happening, where it's like we're moving away from specific types of industries, specific types of technology, and kind of going back to things that were in person, that were small, that were intimate spaces, that are, kind of community driven. I had a friend tell me that when the Beatles would tour, here in the States, they would play clubs that were 50, 70 people, maybe 100. And if it was a 150 person club, that was slamming. You know, and this is one of the biggest acts in the world, but only playing these small rooms. And it put it in perspective for us to say, oh, when we have 50 people in a room, we don't treat each other like we're the Beatles. But the impact of that is still the same, but we compare through social media and all these other things that if we don't have 1 million followers or 1,000 people show up, that you're not successful. You know?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. I've not been the arena size concert goer myself. I've not. I've done maybe a couple here and there, but I've never done the big mega shows. And I know that some individual artists do, and I think about Questlove's film, right?
Yeah.
Summer Soul, with it, so on and so forth. But what I hear at the base of what you're saying, I think, is the level of commercialization that it takes to create something like that. Should we be doing that? And, I think there's a conversation there. When you start getting so big, all kinds of stuff happens, for sure.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff happens.
And you have to partner and make deals with people who, just aren't always about
access to this thing over there that you really need, but you don't have it, then you can't really project what you need to project. But if you do have it, then like you say, you got a particular deals. I heard with Essence that none of the Black American food vendors were brought back. Right?
I don't.
I heard that they had a contest on gumbo versus jollof rice, and people were saying, "Why you gotta compete?
Offer them both.
Offer them both.
This is Essence Fest.
Offer them both.
Essence,
right? Both.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's tough.
So just to say, right,
Yeah.
that you might be onto something there when you talk about that. You might be onto something there for sure.
I think about that, and I also think about how this administration is trying to defund education and privatize it in a way where, folks think about, digital classrooms. I'm not knocking it, but I just have a hard time when I start to kind of look into the future of that and think like, oh, you're gonna try to educate people in arenas as like a methodology, right? And even if people can't make it to the show, doing that kind of thing, in a virtual context, as opposed to thinking about what it means to have these smaller kind of rooms where you can get really in depth and not saying that everything has to be individualized to every person, but there is something to that building of relationship, trust, and the creation of a space where people can come together to learn to all of that. And
no doubt.
Yeah. So when I think about like the future of education, and I think about how it mirrors also what we're kind of seeing in the music industry too, it's like, well, if we embrace certain types of technology and approaches and etc., it's gonna feel like people talking to a wall or talking to a camera, as opposed to really connecting with people and working through the challenging questions, the belief systems, all of the stuff so that people can take in new knowledge and information.
Yeah, well, in many cases, those experiences are, as you know, right, what Frary would call banking experiences. We're just trying to deposit information into you, deposit a skill into you, as opposed to the give and take of processing and thinking, the relationship building that happens. Education is no doubt gonna change drastically over the next 5, 10, 15. One of the reasons is what you're describing, the defunding. And I think that's really the big reason. I think that technology is also a big reason, but I think it's the defunding and the new segregationist tactics that are really going to cause us to rethink education.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can deal with the technology if it's in our hands. We can deal with, right? But if you simply strip all these things away and, you know, you're requiring us to engage in things that are depriving and not fostering security, then, you know, we're put in a position of having to, you know, really innovate in ways that, you know, we haven't perhaps had to for a long time. And I think we're up for the task. I think it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I talk about Arrested Development and that piece, Tennessee being kind of a pre-perception about the renewed role of ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
I think of course, Kendrick Lamar in the same way when he told us, turn the TV off, turn the TV off, turn the TV off, turn the TV off, right?
Yeah.
And I know that in between those two hip hop moments, I got renewed engagement with my ancestry. And what I learned about my ancestors is they created their own cultural institutions and did, you know, they did different things to maintain them and keep them running, and sometimes they didn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? But some strictly relied on the community resources alone. Well, that means people weren't as well off, right?
Mm-hmm.
The teachers didn't have the kinds of vacations and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because the community didn't. And then some people took, you know, money from outside entities and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
People would do a lot of different things, and that's already happening in some ways. There's a renewed, I don't know if renewed is the right word. I think a newly developing niche homeschooling movement among black people. And I have to say it in all of those ways because homeschooling has particular connotations in particular places, right?
Yeah.
Christian nationalism,
Mm-hmm.
right? White supremacy. And I don't see that happening in this particular niche, right? It does not say that I know that there are some black people who are
Yeah.
Christian nationalists and down with the homeschooling in that way. So I know
Right.
that exists, but there's also this new niche space.
Mm-hmm.
People are doing different things. And I think that hip hop leadership is going to help frame what that's going to look like. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's the both of these books together, right? Because I think that even in those spaces, you know, who your teacher is matters,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
their understanding of this concept
Yeah.
of like what it means to provide cultural security is incredibly important to the way that your learning happens. And so, yeah, I think it's both of these things. I think they,
Yeah, no doubt,
they,
no
they
doubt,
definitely
no doubt,
need
no doubt.
the theory and the practice there.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. That sounds like a nice, you know, a nice summation.
Yeah, it does.
I know that there's a lot more to talk about. There always is, but that sounds like a nice.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. So we get this on camera too.
Sure.
Just about like what's next for you? What are your goals? You know, with the book, I know that we've talked kind of a lot about a bunch of things, but where do you want it to go? What kind of experiences are you looking for? I know you talked about the dinner experience in Philly, but what kinds of things are you looking for?
Yeah.
Where would you like it to go?
Well, so I'm actually going to do a number of these small communal experiences in that way across the country, less so to sell the book. I'm happy if it sells, right?
Right.
But more so to help foster those conversations and get people freedom dreaming in that direction. And then, of course, I think that in those spaces, there will be some organic opportunities to say some even more direct things about how we're taking care of our cultural security. That's one thing. The other thing is there's additional writing projects that are related to what's in there. So this book has a lot of narratives, as you said, right? Every section is initiated, framed by a narrative. And those narratives, a lot of them are based on ancestral research. And so I have a collection of poetry, digital collages that I commissioned artists, black women artists around the country to create. A couple folks, one person down in New Orleans, East Coast, here in California, Chicago, from archives from my ancestry.
Wow.
And then I've done a lot of academic writing. And so I'm in conversation right now with another publisher about producing a more, I don't know what's the word they use in the industry. This, of course, is an academic text, even though you can take it outside of academic spaces, especially because of narratives, right? But this is more of a, there's a technical term, and I'm not thinking of it right now. But it's more of a general audience,
Okay.
and so forth. And by that, of course, now I'm in conversation with this publisher, so they're gonna, one of the things they're asking me is, who is the audience, right?
Yeah.
And so I have that audience in mind, and that's black people, really, right? And so the book that I'm thinking about, it's about black family teacher lineages, which is an academic concept that I've been working with. And they're biographic poems that I've written. That was about 30 poems that I've written that are about some of the people who are in that book, even in this book, From Cultural Deprivation. And so I'm at the kind of beginnings of that piece. I have another book that I'm working on as well that is related, but it's still a little more on the academic side. But on the cultural security tip, that's where I'm driving. That's where I'm driving. It's really this particular piece is sort of my next move. I want to tell you that I had a greater, I don't know about greater, but certainly a larger project, but it's on hold right now because of all of this stuff with international flying.
I get it.
I'm wanting to lead an expedition into the interior of Senegal to see the ancient stone circles along the Senegal-Gambia border. And I had a media project I was going to speak on in that regard, but it's on hold. It's on hold.
Yeah, I know. It's tough. Every day it just feels like more terrible news, more this, that, with this country, that country, and
more cultural deprivation.
Yeah, it's more of the same there, and hopefully things change to the more positive directions that you can go. To be able to do that.
And I have not even told everybody, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, my guide, who is Senegalese, he's in Senegal right now, and he's from there. He goes there back and forth, and I work with him on 2 other expeditions to Senegal, right? So we've done this. But he just emailed me, and he said, "Sorry, brother, I've been very busy, but I'm now ready to turn to your project. What are your dates? I'm going to go down and look at the circles myself." And it's hard for me to...
Yeah, no, I got you.
That's my daughter.
Yeah,
that's just some other stuff that I was working on. But really, I think the answer to your question is the Black Family Teacher Lineage book project is my next step of working on my own cultural security and also helping promote it amongst the community too.
I got you. That's dope. That's dope. I'm working on another music related project right now.
All right,
I know
all
that
right.
like this came out, and so like
All right,
this is
all
gonna
right.
live. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
for some time. But I got connected with this kind of this group of artists, and we do a lot of work kind of collaboratively in Boston. And so we started working on the project, and when I started it, I was like, I just had this idea. I really want to make freedom music. I love how you said freedom dreaming, right? Pushing people into that space. Same kind of thing. I was like, there's so much of this information that, if they're going to strip it out of classrooms and all these kind of formal institutions and settings, then the arts is where people are going to turn to get this information. And so to have something ready and prepared to go. And so we're in the early stages of it. We've had maybe one or two production sessions for a project called Diasporadicals.
Ooh, I like that.
I can't.
I like that.
I heard a friend kind of use that term, and I was like, "Can I borrow that?"
Yeah. Okay, you got permission.
And so
Right?
it's cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I like
but
that.
I was just like, a way to kind of tell our collective story, particularly in this time, to help folks know that like it's important to do the work, to do the knowledge of going back, identifying where your ancestors are from, understanding what their cultures were about, leaning into kind of the values that guided them, that help shape us now, and to think about, your steps in the future and how you want to be, right? And how we want the world to be, and moving us closer to that place. And so it's, I talk about like the symbol for hip hop leadership is the Sankofa. It's not this isn't new knowledge. It's a remembering.
That's right. That's right.
I want folks to be able to remember, the things that helped to bring us here are also the same things that'll help get us to where we're going.
That's what's up.
So I'm looking forward to that. If you're ever on the East Coast, you're coming to Boston. We're gonna do a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, I want to talk to you about that, man.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, we can pause it now, but I just want to let you know, like, when you come to join, we'll get you connected with a whole bunch of kind of opportunities out there, but also really like, I'd love for you to kind of participate in some of that project. Part of it's like the knowledge kind of building for us as an artist collective, but also I think the other part of it is like as we're in the process of creating, we're trying to be really intentional about setting the tone with content and music and the energy that goes into all of that. And so I just wanted to share that.
Okay,
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll hit pause. I'll stop on here now.